da reunião.
Uhum.
Translation is muito good. Uma vez que eu estava com os gringos, não sabia como falar atropelado. Eu almost atropelated. Ainda tá ao vivo.
Ok, we can start. Acho que tá um pouco escuro aqui. Ah, não dá para ler? É verdade. Mais importante que vocês vejam. Okay, we are starting the keynote presentation of Professor Michiko Yusa. She's presenting, let me open the program here, one moment. Her presentation title is Engaging in Intercultural Philosophy, Methodological Reflections, ou Engajando na Filosofia Intercultural, uma reflexão metodológica. And Professor Michiko is from the Western Washington University. She's going to talk about her previous professors and the experience on intercultural philosophy. So unfortunately, we couldn't bring Michiko here in person to talk with us, but thanks to the internet, we are able to communicate and be connected again. So please, Michiko, you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Oh, sorry, Michiko, I have something to say. I'm going to share the link of the translation of your presentation in Portuguese so people can follow on YouTube, okay?
And if you could send it to me, the link, I opened it and they said it's not working.
Oh, okay, I'll send you again.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't read Portuguese, but it's nice to have a copy. Since you translated it, thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. So today's talk, my outline, I begin with introduction. I talk about my graduate student experience at UC Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara. I will talk about Professor Raimundo Panico. Then I will talk about Professor Ninian Smart. And then I compare the two very briefly. That's what's meant by refrain or repetition. And then I will go into the heart of this discussion, which is maybe we can think about some sort of methodological guidelines based on these two professors, because they were very famous in the field of intercultural philosophy before it became very big. And then I will talk about quoting from Zen or Chan tradition. There is a saying about look at where you stand, and how can we interpret that to make it meaningful for us. And then I will talk about Raymond Parnikov, who said I must tackle at least two traditions, one Japanese, one something else. And then I was developing interdisciplinary interest and how Professor Keiji Nishitani responded to that. And then I will talk about language requirements. And then I will talk about language teaching. And then finally, I will talk about conclusion. But my emphasis on language is because language is the body of thinking. So by emphasizing language, we are actually talking about how we philosophize. So that is essentially my outline for today. So introduction, professors at UC Santa Barbara. I say this because I think this is really where I started. With all the work, go back to my professors. So this is a tribute. And also today is anniversary of the death of Professor Panikar. So I find it very especially meaningful to be able to talk about my mentor on his anniversary. So this is a picture of my favorite professors. Let me see if I could make it small. Yeah, professor from, oops, it's not coming out, my text. Okay, June 1981-ish, I'm not sure. This is at Santa Barbara on the day of the graduation. My favorite professors gathered, so I took a snapshot. And from left, David Young, he was the professor of ancient Greek for me. And then Professor Ninian Smart in the middle. And then Professor Raimundo Panica on the right. And they were my very favorite professors. And more than that, I think they were friends also. So I was very fortunate to have this very convivial atmosphere as a graduate student. And then two of them gave what's called the Gifford Lectures. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this was established in honor of Hume, David Hume, in Scotland. And it is still going on today. And William James, for example, gave Gifford Lectures, as well as Henri Bergson. So it's a very traditionally very well regarded lecture series. And Ninian and Raimundo, two of them gave Gifford lectures. So you can see the level of scholarship I was exposed to. Okay, so just to summarize what Gifford lectures were, Ninian gave his talk 79 to 1980 on the topic called Beyond Ideology. And they're supposed to write a book on the lectures, publish. So Ninian's book was Beyond Ideology, Religion and the Future of Western Civilization. And I helped him edit or compile the bibliography for this book. And Panikar gave his lectures in 88 to 89, Trinity and Theism. And he published his book many years later, 15 years later, The Rhythm of Being, the Unbroken Trinity. And he said, if I publish my Gifford lectures, that's the end of my life. In other words, he died 2 months after the publication of this book. In other words, it was his very last enduring work. And he kept on building up on it. So it turned into a little elephant. Anyway, never mind. And this is the cover of Ninian's book, Beyond Ideology. And he gave me a little inscription for me in gratitude from Ninian, December 23rd, 1981. And he put an asterisk by my name, who is an incarnation of the Pacific mind. And in this book, he was talking about the emergence of something not completely Western or not completely Eastern, but something else, which he called Pacific mind. And he thought I was a kind of an incarnation of it. Anyway, that's very sweet of him. And then Raymond Panica, The Rhythm of Being, this is the cover, The Unbroken Trinity. And this is a picture of my seminar mate, Scott Eastham. He's holding his two daughters. They were just the little girls then, and Raymond Panica in the middle. And on his left, I guess, on the right, is his wife. He married quite late in his life, and Maria. So this I thought was a very interesting picture because Scott Eastham worked as the editor, the original editor of Raimundo's Gifford lectures. And so I wanted to give you a background. So there is a living reality behind any book that's published. So I go into Raimundo Panica. Raimundo is his Spanish name, and Raymond is a Catalan equivalent. And he was born in Barcelona. Mother was Catalan, but he was not supposed to use his Catalan name under Franco. General Franco, and he was only able to go back to his Catalan roots in the late 90s, I think. So he changed his name to Raymond, but I knew him as Raimundo. So it is more natural for me to call him Raimundo. He was born in 1918 and he died in 2010. Today. So a little bit about his background. He was born of Hindu father, a Brahmin class, and Spanish mother, who was a concert pianist. They fell in love, they had 4 children, and Raimundo was the oldest of 4 children. And because the father spoke English, Raimundo grew up knowing English as his, father tongue, if not mother tongue. And because of being Spanish and also Catalan, Spanish and Catalan were his mother tongue. And he grew up in Europe, so you can imagine French, German, all these languages he was able to acquire. He was a polyglot, certainly. And he earned 3 PhDs in 46, 58, 61. First one was in chemistry, second one was in philosophy, the third one was in theology. And he was ordained a Catholic priest in 46, and he joined Opus Dei in 1940, and they kicked him out in 1966 because he was too much of a free spirit. And the whole thing is very interesting, but I'm not going to go into it at the moment. Anyway, he got a visiting professorship at Harvard University Center for the Study of World Religions from 67 to 71. And then he came to Santa Barbara in 72 to 1986. And I was an undergraduate student in 72, and I was an exchange student from ICU in Tokyo, International Christian University. And we had our junior year abroad program. And I was advised to go to Santa Barbara because Raymond Panica was moving from Harvard to Santa Barbara. It would be an opportunity to get to know this very unique person. So I took that advice and I went to Santa Barbara. Now, Panica's methodology, I'm just summarizing main points that I remember. This is not scholarly. This is my digestion, whatever I digested from Panica's long years of teaching. So it is my own take. So he was talking about always, you become what you know. So he was always kind of telling us, before you choose a dissertation topic, be careful, because you will become one. Whenever you choose as your dissertation topic, you will become it. That's a bit of a scary thought. And I didn't know what he meant when I was a young undergraduate student, but now I know exactly what he means. And the process is that what you know, you love what you study. So what you know is, in a sense, what you love. So he was talking about the unity of mind and heart. If you truly dedicate yourself to something, you love it, you know it, and you are it, you become it. And so he was always talking about this organic unity. So studying was not just one thing, it was your whole being. So you take any part of you and it contains your DNA. Yeah? So he has that kind of worldview. So comparative study, he was very not happy with, you take an apple and orange, two things, and then you are the third position, and you objectively kind of talk about two things as if you're not related to them and you're the judge. He was very against it. But he said to me, all knowledge is inherently comparative because we understand a new thing only based on what we already know. Okay, if you see something new, you refer back to what you already know, and then you start to understand. Therefore, knowledge is comparative. In that sense, he endorsed comparative studies, but not as a third position, okay? So I think there is a very huge difference between Panikar's comparative studies and, other more superficial, let's compare A and B type of approach. And this disinterested observer, that position is not tenable, as Heisenberg's experiment has proven. And this Raimundo often quoted in seminar, not exact passage, but he would refer to Heisenberg all the time. And Raimundo's approach may be summarized as a dialogical. Dialogical is a pun. It means, on the one hand, dialogue. On the other hand, dialogos. Dia is through, logos, in this case, it may be conversation or language. So through language, so that's the dialogical first part. Diatopical, that means two or three different topoi. Diatopoi. Diatopical hermeneutics. And he distinguished his hermeneutical position from Gadamer's and from the traditional hermeneutical position of the Bible and all that exegetical traditions. So in these three words, we can summarize Panikar's method. And I do believe that this diatopical hermeneutics can be applied, mutatis mutandis, to intercultural philosophy, the study of it. Now, if I were to liken Raimundo's method, I would think of this very famous poem, Caminante son tus huellas, el camino y nada más. Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. Antonio Machado. He was very fond of this poem. And I think he actually walked his own way. He had no pre-made methodology. So for me to talk about methodology is really a mutiny. But if I were to talk about methodology in the spirit of Antonio Machado, then he would smile at me from heaven. So it was also Raymond Panikov who created a bridge for me to Nishida's philosophy. So I really need to pay respect because he really changed my life. Panikov knew through his professional life, Nishitani Keiji, Hisamatsu Shinichi, and Takeuchi Yoshinori. Those are the Kyoto School philosophers, scholars, and thinkers. And so Panikov said, why don't you study Nishida Kitaro? Because these people in Kyoto speak very highly of their professor, Nishida. And when I turned to other people like Kuki Shuzo and other people, he didn't say no, but he was not happy. So I knew he wanted me to study Nishida. So I gave my first seminar presentation on Nishida's philosophy, and I still have my initial paper, which is dated May 13th, 1975. And in those days, this is how we copied things, what's called ditto. We type on this special paper and we print it. I mean, this was the cheapest way to produce copies. And apparently I talked about nothingness. And I talked about being and non-being and absolute nothing and so on and so forth. When I look at it, I am ashamed because apparently I didn't know Nishida at all in 1975. So I approached Nishida as a kind of a Husserlian phenomenology only because Nishida talked about the nature of consciousness. And of course, it should have been the other way around, but that it shows how naive I was. And there weren't many publications around that time. So I began to walk my own camino. I began my own walking. And when I was able to I was able to make some headway in this particular presentation, but where I got stuck, I was stuck for the next, I would say, 30 years. Took me 30 years, maybe longer, to get through this stumbling block. So that's why, well, yeah, it takes a long time. So look, it's like 50 years ago. It's amazing, isn't it? But so it is. And this is a photograph of my PhD graduation, June 1983. Raimundo Panica, as my advisor, led my way, and he introduced me to the people as the new PhD, so newly minted PhD. And then, yeah, in the back, you can see a tall man with the red gown. He was Professor Walter Capps, who ran for the Congress. He became a congressman, and he did a lot to repatriate Vietnam War veterans. So, it was a very vibrant time at UC Santa Barbara. We are a very diverse bunch of intellectuals engaged in actual issues. Okay, now this is the slide I wanted to finish on the segment of Raimundo Panica, because this is Titian in Venice, very famous painting, Assumption of Mary. And Raimundo it was his very last public appearance. And he was really frail by then. He was like 2 years before he died. And he talked about some things, but it was not important. What was important was this kind of an atmosphere that you felt that his whole life, was summarized in this beautiful way. And I remember him always like this in Venice, the Basilica dei Frari, and Titian's Assumption of the Virgin in the background. Okay, so now I move on to Ninian. He was born in 1927, May 6th, and 2001, January 29th. He died shortly before 9/11, but he predicted something of that sort might happen to the United States because his study of religions, world religions, heightened his sense of alarm. So it's a very interesting case again. Okay, this is Ninian in his, around the time I met him, around 1977. His parents were both Scottish. Father was a very famous professor of astrology at the University of Cambridge, and he had two distinguished elder brothers. And in those days, if you went to the university library, you know, there is the card catalog. If you went to Smart, you see his father's works, and then you see his elder brother's works, and you see his second elder brother's works, and then Ninian's works. It's all Smart family. But now it's much more diverse, yeah. And mother was a very classy woman. She apparently wore high heels at home every day. And she was very literally minded. She was an expert in poetry, and she was a conversationalist. She was very witty, and she was artistic. So Ninian got a lot out of mother, I think. And Ninian is the name of a Scottish saint. And he told me in private that it is my aspiration to become pious, despite other people, you know, who thought he was just a scholar. But I think he was a little more than that. And he established the first department of religious studies at the University of Lancaster in 1967. That is the beginning of the academic study of religion at the university, secular university, independent of theology. So he contributed greatly to the study of religion. And this is a cover of the second edition of the textbook by Ninian, which was used quite widely in the 60s and 70s, maybe well into 80s. And still, if you Google Ninian Smart, you will see 7 dimensions of religion: ritual, ritualistic dimension, experiential dimension, narrative mythic, doctrinal, philosophical, ethical, legal, social, institutional, and material, artistic. When you put it this way, it's cut and dried and it means nothing. So I thought of Ninian's life and I kind of tried to digest, and I thought of birthdays. Ninian was very fond of everybody's birthdays. He would remember your birthday and he would give me a call if I'm not in Santa Barbara. He would start singing happy birthday on the telephone. So that is a ritual to celebrate, and experiential because you all usually have a nice party and you enjoy, you share this joy. And then narrative mythic in a sense that all sorts of stories are told about, you know, about you, about somebody else, about, so a lot of talking, narrative mythic. And then doctrinal, philosophical, maybe there isn't much of doctrinal, philosophical in the forefront, but to celebrate a birthday means celebration of life. And Ninian was very aware of the preciousness of life because Ninian and his wife Libushka, they lost their youngest son, who was maybe 6-7 years old, to illness. So they always carried the sadness in them. And so they knew birthdays are philosophically important. It is the core of any message, no? For religion, celebration of life. And then ethical, legal. I think of Ninian very, for him, wedding anniversary was very important because wedding has a kind of ethical and legal dimension. It's not just getting married, but you become responsible. It has a legal implications, inheritance, all that, right? And then social, institutional marriage, you know, has that dimension. And then finally, material, artistic. Ninian always composed a poem or two on these special occasions, and he would buy a really nice greeting card, and he would write them out, and he would give the card as a present. So there is that material artistic aspect, no? So when you think about Ninian, the man, and what he did, these different dimensions come alive. So, but also, if I said to Ninian, look, these are just academic distillation, and he would be not so offended, of course, depends on how I say it to him, but he was not really hostage to his own theories. So he said, oh, yes, but if you look at, from a certain angle, religion as a phenomena, you could detect these aspects, couldn't you? He would say that. So we always kept a very light-hearted discourse on academic matters. And that was Ninian. So he was very astute, but also very light-hearted about it. And Ninian gave me all sorts of practical guides. And when I translated one of Nishida's essays for him as a term paper requirement, I got a B. I was very upset because B is not as good as A. But he said, your paragraphs are too long. Nishida, original was like one paragraph. He said, just too long. So if the original is too long, break it down to smaller paragraphs. So that was the first thing he told me. He was really annoyed with Nishida's writing style. And then use subtitles as necessary. And that's how Western people understand, follow your flow of the argument. Okay. Avoid neologisms because I was still learning my English and I like to use big words. He said, don't do that. He said, why not use problem as opposed to problematic? Problematic has a German connotation and we thought, it's kind of cool to use big words. He said, no, no, no. Whenever you can use shorter, smaller, ordinary word, do that. So he was really hard on me. And then as a teacher, he was also very full of advice. He said, when you are a teacher, be objective. Do not bring in your assumptions to color your judgment of the student's performance. So be fair in grading students. And he was very adamant on this one. And I think that's the best of British fair-mindedness. I think it came through. And he also said, be happy. If your family members or friends are depressed or something, you cannot make them happy. So you might as well be happy yourself because your happiness is contagious. So he said, happy parents make happy children. And he always practiced this. And then he said, publish your work without taking too much time after you finish one book. And if you find a mistake in the old book, publish another book to explain. And this one I'm not able to do very well because of my perfectionist fear. But I think Ninian had a good point there. Okay, so this is a picture of Ninian and his Italian wife, Libushka. And this is kind of a party my friend gave in my honor when I finished my dissertation in Santa Barbara. And we invited Ninian, Libushka, and Raimundo, and a few others to this party. Now, this is a Ninian's watercolor. I tried to take a photo. It's a bit crooked. Don't worry about that. And the title is Portrait of a Tree at Carbonara. Carbonara is a place near Lago di Como, facing Lago di Como. And that's where Libushka was born. And she kept the house where she was born. So Ninian And all the children, everybody would go there for summer. And he would invite his friends to come and stay. So I went there, I think, twice. And his father was a gifted watercolorist. So Ninian would really enjoy doing watercolor. So this is Ninian, I think, at his Ninian in essence. Brevity is the soul of wit. La bravidad es el alma del ingenio. Oh, I cannot pronounce Portuguese. Concisão é a alma do saber. Okay.
Muito bem. Well done, well done.
Obrigado. So to refrain, many people thought Panica was more like a contemplative, whereas Ninian was a hard-nosed British analytic philosopher. And my friends used to bug me, how could you study with very different kinds of professors? Are you, what's going on? So this is my answer. Instead of going into all the details, I used to say, while Professor Panica encourages me to follow my intuition, Professor Smart challenges me to maintain my level-headed critical attitude. And that seemed to convince my curious friends. And anyway, in other words, there are different kinds of wisdom, different kinds of guidance you can receive from your professors. And you know what to look for, and you're very happy. So this is a photo of the same party. On the right, on the screen, is Ninian. On the left is Raymond Panica, and I was much younger then. I'm in the middle. So that is my treasure, my memory from my graduate days. And I didn't want to finish my dissertation because I knew I had to leave the Garden of Eden once I finished my dissertation. So it's one of those last happy months in Santa Barbara. So now I get into the heavy duty engaging intercultural philosophical methodology stuff. Okay, so Kyakka Shoko. This one is often a little reminder when you go into a Buddhist temple and what it means to the most ordinary Japanese people is to take off your shoes. And once you take off your shoes, stash them on the shoe rack so that, you don't clutter the entranceway. So, put away your shoes. But I think it's a lot more than that. Shed light on where you stand. Okay, that's the literal translation. And if you know me, you know where I'm going with this particular saying. Whenever I saw this, I said, it's much more than this. I didn't say that to my Zen masters or Zen monks because they would say, you are a little too whatever. So, but I kept it in myself. But I'm telling you that there is a lot more than just put away your shoes. Okay. So literally, mind your steps. Okay, fine, no problem. Know thyself in a Socratic way so that you may know the other. That's another way. The other constitutes the source of my self-knowledge. That's what Raimundo would say. If you know the other, they will shed light on who you are. Do not ignore your religious philosophical tradition. That's another I take from this one. So don't forget where you stand. So where is this saying found? Since this is an academic talk, I thought I should give you at least one pedantic piece of information. This is found in the Wudang, Huiyang, compiled in 1252, and English translation of the title would be 5 Records of Chan Schools Assembled into One. And it was during the Song period. Okay, so the persona dramatis, Master Fa Yen or Ho En in Japanese. And there were 3 eminent disciples. They were doing zazen, up in the mountain, and it was getting dark. So the master said, it's time to get home. Go down, let's get back to the temple. And 3 eminent disciples, their names are Fojan or Bukkan in Japanese, Fo Yen, Butsugen in Japanese, Fo Guo or Buddha in Japanese. So the first one is Chinese pronunciation, the second one is Japanese pronunciation. And you can say 3 Butsu. That means Buddha. So sometimes these 3 disciples are known as 3 Buddhas, and they're all very famous masters. They became very famous masters. So disciples later becoming masters. So now the koan is very interesting because of dialogue. It doesn't mean whose statements are better than the others. It's not a game of defeating the other, but it is an aspect of one and the same maybe experience that you can see in different lights. So in a way, one person can experience all these different statements. That's how I look at all the Zen sayings and Zen koans. It's my take. Don't take me seriously, okay? So Master says, what do you make of the present situation we are in? Because it was getting dark and there is they didn't have a torch. There was no electricity in those days. So it's getting dark. We can hardly see a trail. Put it into words. This is so Chan, very Zen. Express it with words. How you are, what the situation in which you are. Express it. So Master is challenging. How would you describe this situation? So the first one, Bukkan, he was a poet at heart. He said, a pair of phoenix above, and they are covering the sky beautifully. So we can see the night sky with 2 adorning big birds. Isn't this wonderful? So that was what he was saying. The second one, Fo Yan or Butsugen, he's kind of a realist. I'm scared. He said, there might be a snake waiting on the way. I might be bitten. I'm scared. That's a very natural reaction. And finally, Bukka, the last one, he compiled the Blue Cliff Records, He said, mind our steps and get back to the temple safely. Let's mind our steps, okay? So these are the 3. So the last one, what was it? Anyway, look at your steps, okay? That's the origin of the saying. Look at your steps, mind your steps. So some people say the last one is the most enlightened, but actually no, they were saying, describing the situation they were in, but the last one somehow stuck in the canon because it was the shortest of the 3. Anyway, never mind. Now this is Nishida. Nishida also talks about something very similar. Those who are in the habit of looking at the world from outside as some object do not see where they stand, where their feet stand. Ashimoto o minai. The same idea. Those who have a kind of a objectified, theoretical abstract thinking actually do not see where they stand. We exist in this world as the body. Some lines are deleted. Nishida. So this is a crux of Nishida's later philosophy, okay? And I find that very interesting. So now I will develop Nishida's what I call topological dialectic, or 場所的弁証法 in Japanese. And what can we learn? Something about concrete thinking, 具体的思索, as opposed to abstract thinking, something concrete thinking. You know, Heidegger talked about Dichten, Denken, and Rechnen, Denken, you know, poetic thinking and calculating thinking. And for Nishida, concrete thinking and abstract thinking were the two main opposing ideas. And Nishida's critique of Tanabe was that Tanabe engaged in a kind of abstract thinking. He forgot that he was a body. He disregarded the physical dimension. Anyway, so that's neither here nor there, but I wanted to share this with you a little bit. Okay. So now this is all summarizing Nishida. To become aware that we are our body and that we are conscious beings. Conscious beings, that means 場所的. So topoi, we are conscious beings, we are topoi in the world, is a good starting point to carry out philosophy concretely. So we are body and we are conscious in the world. Heidegger said we are being in the world, but he didn't say we are conscious being in the world. And Nishida says conscious. And to him, that was essential. So that element, the dimension of consciousness, was missing in Heidegger. Although present, but somehow in the formulation, Heidegger was still kind of like distancing this conscious being, that experience, somewhat. And I think that's where Nishida found Heidegger not enough. You are not an abstract object of my philosophical investigation as much as I am not such. You and I complete each other, intersubjective principle. I don't exist without you, you don't exist without me. You and I are. In a way, that's the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is intersubjective. Okay, so that's the second point. In my physical locatedness within the world, and in my relationality to the environment, I'm already in touch with the heart of the matter. Now, when we try to study something, that's the matter, okay? Heart of the matter is what it is as it is. So in my physical locatedness within this world, in my relationality to my environment, I already have access to that, to what we want to study. I caught someone talking about indigenous tradition. If that indigenous tradition, this afternoon, you know, I turn on the Zoom a little, 1 minute or so. Anyway, if that indigenous tradition is within your environment and you are aware that you are connected to it in some way, you don't know how, but you sense that you are connected to it, then you are in a good place to do a study of that tradition. So, and I have to apologize to Ninian because here I am neologizing locatedness. I'm being located in this world, okay? So I think I'm excused here only once, I think. Okay. So this awareness of being located in the world, and I'm in my environment, and the environment conditions me as much as I condition my environment. This kind of awareness, excuse me, typo, saves me from falling into abstract thinking, detached from how things are. Somehow we start creating things. We start to become a writer, novelist, and not a scholar. We kind of fabricate in our own theory, and that's not what scholarship is all about for Nishida. Okay. I'm sorry for third save is a typo. You don't need it. Okay. Every person as a topos, a field of consciousness, is unique personality. So is perhaps every culture. This is transition I still need to make. But just as every person is unique, every culture in some way is unique. And that's where things become a little dicey in a way, because sometimes, the idea of cultural chauvinism or nationalism, the whole thing gets mixed in here. But I don't think that's what Nishida was doing. Nishida was focusing on what you are, how unique each person is. And I'm not, Nishida is not the only person who is saying this. All the artists would agree with this. Okay. Now, second point, this I thought might be interesting to some of you, as I already mentioned, the indigenous tradition for many of the Latin American scholars, as well as now for Japanese also. For my dissertation research, Panika insisted that I work on two traditions. First I chose Nishida, and some of my dissertation advisors said, that's big enough, huge task to even do research on Nishida. And Panika was away on his sabbatical then. And when he returned from his sabbatical, he was very unhappy with the advice that his colleagues gave me. And he said, no, you must choose somebody else. And he took me to his library. He had a big personal library at home. He said, choose one. So he showed me the shelves where all the German books were. He wanted me to choose one person, but I said, no, I don't read my German very well. And then he turned to a shelf with French books. So I said, maybe okay, I read my French a little better. So I chose Jacques Maritain, which some of my friends thought was a mistake afterwards, because Maritain went out of fashion, quote unquote. But just recently I was reading his wife Raisa Maritain's work. We have been friends together. She talks about how Henri Bergson was such a charismatic, inspirational figure for the generation of Jacques Maritain and Raisa Maritain. So now I go back, to Henri Bergson through Jacques and Raisa. So nothing is in a way wasted, I think, yes. And also working on two traditions in a way advanced my knowledge of my own native tradition, and that actually got me my university position. They telephoned me and said, can you teach Japanese history? So I said, maybe if I try, I could teach Japanese history, and that's how I got my interview. So you never know. And then to have legs in two ponds, your own native tradition, and something different, developed my sense of what is fair comparison and what is far-fetched. Sometimes you choose two things to study for the sake of studying. Sometimes that comparison doesn't work. And that is a kind of a gamble. And so I began to develop my sense of workable equivalence in my words, or Raimundo would call it homomorphic equivalence. You know, something works in certain way in one culture, and another word would work in the same way in different culture, and he called it homeomorphic equivalence. So I came to become very in tune with this kind of thinking. And I think it's very helpful in doing intercultural philosophy. Now, I developed my interdisciplinary interest because I saw a no demonstration, no drama, and a master, very famous master, came from Japan to University of British Columbia. They had a very good program there. There was a professor who worked on no drama, and this no master turned out to be a rather handsome man, and that was enough for me to become interested in no drama. And so there are pros and cons, I would imagine, you know, to be interested in something other than what you're studying. Is it good or is it bad? And Professor Nishitani Keiji told me, I just remember it this way, it's good to study other areas outside Nishida's philosophy, because wider interest will lead you to understand Nishida better. And I think he was right on the mark, you know. Nishida's philosophy encompasses art, psychology, logic, natural science, physics and environmental science, legal science, mathematics, and also his wide range of Eastern and Western traditions, from Plato to Husserl. You know, your wide interest cannot hurt you. And I think Nishitani knew that himself. He was interested in Eckhart and all that. So I think that is a very good advice to be interested in interdisciplinary interest. And the reason why I chose the no drama was because it added color to Nishida's kind of a monochromatic, you know, descriptions, philosophical writings. But once I got deep into the heart of his writings started to gain color and all the radiance. And now there is no difference for me. But I think it really helped me at some stage of my life to be interested in both. Now, language, let me talk about language. At Santa Barbara, 2-year college proficiency in German and French were required for graduate students in religious studies. And I did not think of my Japanese to replace these requirements. So I went along with other American and European graduate students to learn these 2 languages. And I also took up Italian, Latin, and ancient Greek. And then I also read classical Chinese because Professor Wei Min-du was on campus from UC Berkeley one summer. And I thought it would be interesting to take his course. And then I took Sanskrit from Jerry Larson. And I tell you, this saved my life in 2 ways. You can't imagine how dramatic this sounds. I wouldn't be me if not for Sanskrit. How? One, you know, drugs were very common in those days, and people are, you know, smoking and doing hash and LSD and all that, right? And it kept me out of drugs because I didn't have the time to get stoned. Sanskrit took so much time to study. So first, I was very busy. Second, it gave me the confidence that language, grammar, or logos is universal and transcultural. Reason is transcultural. You know, as a young, uncertain Japanese graduate student, and I was learning my English then, I was not certain. I was not sure if I was cut out to do the work, you know, graduate work. And then while I was taking my Sanskrit, I started to make all the paradigms, declensions, and whatever, you know, the nouns and verbs, you know. And then my guesswork started to be right on the mark. I said, gee, what I thought it would be based on some rules is actually right. My mind, my logical mind works the same way as any other mind, be it American, Canadian, doesn't matter. It is universal. So I gained tremendous confidence at that time that the fact that I am my native tongue was Japanese, and yet it didn't matter. Reason is transcultural. Logos is transcultural. So Sanskrit gave me this confidence. It literally saved my life. So isn't that really interesting? Okay. So in organic languages is connected to thinking, as we all know. And so Nishida was very fond of this Max Muller saying, language is the body of thinking. In Japanese, 言語は思想の身体である. Language is thinking's body. Thinking's body. 思想の身体である by Max Muller. So, I think that's well said. And then Plotinus, thinking, knowing, life, Zen, and being, Einai, who I am, and so on, are all together in what is real or actual, on. To knowing, to Zen, to Einai, and toi onti. And Nerd, 566 21 22. My Greek is not good enough, but it's okay when I go to Loeb edition. There is English, there is Greek, and then English side by side. And then I can trace back to the original. And that helps me a lot to be able to understand what Plotinus was actually saying. So I think even a little bit of language is greatly helpful in doing philosophy. Now, let me talk about language teaching, because some people laughed at me because I was teaching Japanese. And they said, you know, they badmouthed me and said, ha, 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 she's just a language teacher, you know. The implication was that you can't be a philosopher when you're teaching language. And I tell you, that's a BS. Teaching language does not diminish one's philosophical inquiry and reflection. So I can say this with confidence to you. And I quote Mori Arimasa, who left his university position at the University of Tokyo and went to France as a scholarship student, and then decided to stay in France, in Paris. And he quit his University of Tokyo position. And then eventually he got a job at Sorbonne and College of Oriental Languages to teach Japanese literature and language. And anyway, he talked about his language experience of language teaching and philosophy. And he said he gained his knowledge of Dogen and Motori Noridaga, for instance, from his language teaching at the Sorbonne. And that made him a unique thinker because, you know, this is an interdisciplinarity, isn't it? Literature and philosophy, usually they are completely considered to be separate genres, but they are artificial dividing whatever lines, no? So Mori was able to create his own brand of thinking. And he said it was very beneficial. And I think one gains the analytical understanding of the language one teaches. And one learns also the organizational skills, as grammar points are all neatly interrelated. So how to organize your thinking, I think also you can gain some hint from language teaching. But I think teaching language made me a better philosopher because I have much more analytical understanding of the language. I applied the etymological approach to each kanji, for example, and that resulted in my first book, Basic Kanji. And this, I think I got promoted to professor with this book or something, I don't know. Anyway, so it's always beneficial, And I studied 423 kanji, each with, and I introduced each with etymology. And this is the first attempt to do so. Nowadays, all the newspapers everywhere, they do etymology. But this is the first book that ever did the etymological study in teaching Japanese. This was published in 1989 from Tokyo, Taishukan. It's out of print now because the editor who dealt with, he retired, but you can still find old used copy in the internet. And some people say it's the best book they have ever seen to learn Japanese. Never mind. If you teach Japanese language to earn your bread, do not disparage. It is a good training to nurture your philosophical awareness and your organizational analytic skills. So if you're teaching Portuguese or Spanish to sustain yourself, that's okay. So long as you do other things, you keep up with your own philosophical discourse. Yeah? So that is my little bit of advice. Now an exercise. Now that we are in here, I have a question for you. ゲーテにおいては内もなく外もなく、映るものはあるがままにあるのである。何事もなきところから来たり、何事もなきところに去りゆくのである。しかも、各無より無に入るところに微妙なる人間の響きがあるのである。Okay, so I will go into this passage again, but I highlighted here a Chinese character. This one is pronounced tokoro. This is pronounced tokoro. Here is tokoro. Same. How come some things are in the original Chinese or character and some are in the Japanese syllabary? Why is that? That is my question. So I said exercise. Okay. So why the same word tokoro is written in kanji and tokoro in Japanese hiragana? Okay, that is my question. So instead of wasting time and scaring other people, I'll move on to and this one passage is from Nishida's Geite no Heike. I'm translating it right now. Okay, let's do this. For Goethe, Geiteにおいては, for Goethe, there is neither inside nor outside. What is what is what is as there, as it is. So all that there are exists as they are. So in Goethe, there is no inside or outside. For Goethe, there is no inside or outside. All that there are exist as they are. Okay, that's the first paragraph. So the subject of this sentence is implied. Subject of this sentence is implied. It's introduced in the first sentence. So this is what's called topic language. Japanese is a topic language. We are talking about that which is, or all that there are. Okay, so things that exist, they come from there is nothing, and they disappear. Sariyuku is going away from me. So kitari, coming towards me and going away from me to where there is nothing. Okay, so that's why there is the tokoro. Okay, everything comes into being from where there is nothing and vanishes into where there is nothing. The place where, the place which, where. It is almost like a noun. Okay? Place. しかも、moreover、各無より無に入るところに微妙なる人間の響きがある。Moreover, in this way, in this manner, this ところ is not the place, but in this manner, from nothing to entering into nothing, there is the sound, reverberation of human beings, which is very subtle, or which are very subtle. Okay, so moreover, in this very coming into being from nothing and returning to nothing, we find the subtle resonance, hibiki, of humanity. So that's how I would translate, but you may translate differently. But this kind of awareness, because I was dealing with students' questions, Sensei, how come there is kanji and then there is hiragana for the same sound? I became very aware of this different locative use of the language. It's not necessarily the place, but sometimes in this manner, in this way. It's a very higher level of grammar, third year, fourth year grammar, which is not taught in the textbooks. But if you are a student of mine, I teach you these things. Okay, next. So, conclusion. Am I doing okay? Yeah. Am I going out of time?
You are doing okay. You're going to conclusion, so it's fine.
Okay. Conclusion. Play to your strengths. Okay. So we are talking about methodology. Two questions. First one, are the bilingual texts as opposed to monolingual text helpful in carrying out your intercultural philosophy? I just showed you a little segment of my Goethe translation, as well as Plotinus. And my first question is, bilingual text helpful? So I want to hear from you on this one. You could reserve your answer to question answer period. Yes? Is that a good idea?
Sure.
Okay, so that was my first question. Second, there is a new book called Key Concepts in World Philosophies, edited by my friends Sarah Flavel and Chiara Robiano from Bloomsbury, published last year. Are you familiar with it or not? Is it used widely in Latin America? Because the idea was that it would be a textbook for intercultural philosophy. I don't think it is. I have some questions about it. But if you are using it, I'd like to hear about it. And if you're not using it, but you have seen it, I'd like to know why you're not using it. And if you're not using it at all, I would ask you to Google it. And I think there are some sample chapters or something available online. Okay, and this is advertisement. I contributed a chapter called I-Thou relationship, in which I talk about Nishida and Nishitani's take on I-Thou, subjectivity, intersubjectivity. And I already gave one thing about the consciousness as intersubjective. So all these things you will see in this particular book. No one talks about it. I don't think it's read very widely. Anyway, never mind. Okay, next. This word, metahodos, that's a Greek word, meaning that hodos is it is a noun meaning the road. Meta is with or by which. So the road by which you proceed in reaching to your destination. So my idea was to tell you or suggest develop your own metahodos. Okay? I don't like a method. Metahodos is the origin of method. but I think metahodos is much more graphic, the road by which you proceed, and I like that better. So in my case, I added a field element of field research, partly because I really enjoy going to places, meeting people, eating and drinking with people, and finding something new. So and also it's a good excuse for not writing. So I added field research, and it's quite indispensable for me. And also in this process, I have become a dog with a nose to find untapped treasures. You know, dog. Canine, canine, canis in Latin. I don't know how you say that in Spanish or Portuguese. Anyway, never mind. It's a dog, you know. Woo woo.
Yeah,
Professor, ah,
in Portuguese we say cachorro.
cachorro. Okay, I became one. Professor Ueda Shizuteru, I told him that I have become a dog. And he said, it's excellent. He understood it right away. He said, that's very good. Okay. Now, for this reason, I'm sorry I cannot visit Sao Paulo this time because I miss pan de queijo, pan de yuca, and also seeing you, my Latin American friends and colleagues, yes? And many enjoyable trips I took to write these books. So Zen and Philosophy, Nishida's biography, and the Religiones de Japón. This one is in Espanol. Religiones de Japan. This is in Portuguese. Okay, these two were edited by Ninian Smart as the general editor, and they were translated. Original was in English. Anyway, so I really enjoyed my field research doing. And with this slide, I end. Follow your own inner guide. I think that's the best advice to everybody, correct? Okay, so fini.
Thank you very much, Professor. Well, oops, sorry. I'd like to open for questions, comments. We have a few comments and questions on the YouTube channel, but if the people here would like to start. Yes, Carlos, okay. Yes.
I'm sorry, I took a bit of time, didn't I?
Yes.
That's what.
Yes, Professor. I was so entertained that I didn't tell you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Sensei. I would like to speak briefly, only to pick on your question, whether we find useful to have bilingual translations. And well, I would like to mention a personal experience, a recent experience. It's I've been studying Nagarjuna because last year, when I was at an online event, and I talked about Nagarjuna, and in the process of preparing my presentation, I realized, and especially by looking at Professor David Kalupahana's translation of the fundamental verses of the Middle Way, I realized that
Mura Maria Makakarika. Yeah.
And well, reading Kalupahana's translation, I realized that I didn't understand Nagarjuna sufficiently
Right.
enough. So I decided to study his translation and to revise the Sanskrit. Then, well, two results. One is that I understood that I need to learn Sanskrit, a little Sanskrit. because really I feel that there is something, or there are many things that are very important in that book, and it needs to be studied very seriously. And hopefully it will be more thoroughly studied in Latin America that way. I hope that happens. And the second thing, to answer your question, I definitely believe that bilingual translations are very, very important for our work. Because it happens that even if, in my case, for example, even if my knowledge of the original language is scarce, that is the way to enter. That is the way to start studying. And the bilingual translations, for me, they clarify a lot of nuances and details that even the best translator could not grasp or could not transmit. And it is interesting, not that I believe that there is a commitment of the translator to a certain purity of the original. Well, you know, Raquel Bozo. She told me once, well, I heard from her once that translations can even enrich the original. So it's not that I believe that there's a certain absolute purity in the original, but being able to compare, and we're talking about comparing here, being able to compare, I think it is even richer than reading the original or just reading the translation. That's my experience, at least.
Thank you. May I say one thing
Sure.
to you? You know, when I do side by side, I can see my mistakes much better. You know, when I translate, sometimes I don't remember the whole thing, you know, and then I translate and then I don't go back to it. But when I have a text side by side, it's easier to check back and forth. And then I realize, gee, I made this mistake. I don't believe it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for the translator also, I think it's a little more useful. And maybe we underestimate this idea of juxtaposition. We think it's just, I don't know. And also another thing about Mura Mariama Kakarika, I also went to the entire Japanese original by Saigusa, you know, huge book, which has Tibetan, which has also Sanskrit, and 2 different Chinese versions. You know, it's an unbelievable work. And I made a photocopy of the entire book. So if I travel and if I see you, I can give you a disc. But
Thank you very much.
I realized at that time how important it is to have different translations and different interpretations and the original. So I'm in complete agreement with you.
Thank you very much, Leslie.
Thank you.
We have many questions.
Sim, eu vou rapidinho, então. Well, I'll ask in West, I'll just comment in English. First, of course, I definitely agree with Carlos and with Yusa Sensei as well about the translation thing. And we are actually doing a translation of the Zettai no Junreki Jiko Doitsu with Enrico at Nanzan. And it's going to be published in only 1 volume in Japanese, Portuguese, Spanish, French, English. I think that's it. And so, not Sanskrit, not yet. So we are doing like a translation. So our idea is so that people can like compare the translations and work with this. And actually, the comment I was thinking about doing it was what you were talking about when you said about the tokoro. You can either write using the kanji or you can write using the hiragana. And there's actually another kanji that Nishida uses sometimes, right? And say like the hosho no sho, right? There's another example that is always pretty hard for me when I need to translate, which is the mono, right? I say because you have mono like the sha one, like which means like person, and then you have mono, which means thing or object. Then you have the mono in hiragana, which would be like coisa or the res, right? In Latin, that thing is again. And then we also have the one that was used like in the late Meiji period or sometime around that, which would be the tozai, right? And say using Chinese for thing, higashi and nishi.
Donshi.
I don't know how to say it in Chinese.
No, donshi is Chinese translation of thing, which we
Yeah,
don't
right.
use in Japanese.
Yeah, right. You know that, Carlos? I don't know how to say in Chinese. Sorry, Sensei.
Don't see these.
And I have one small question. When myself, as a Brazilian, first went to Japan to study Japanese philosophy, I remember my instructor telling me that I want you to read Japanese philosophy from the standpoint of someone who studied philosophy in Brazil, and from the standpoint of someone who has like this Brazilian background, right? My question to you is, when Ninian Smart Sensei, professor, and also mainly when Professor Panikar, when they were instructing or guiding you in Japanese philosophy, what kind of advice did they give to you? Like, did they ask you to read Nishida from the standpoint of a Japanese reader or a Japanese scholar, or were they expecting you to read it from the standpoint of a student in an American university? Get what I mean?
Yes, I think that is I will not go in there because if I answer your question, I will be criticizing your professor.
Oh, okay. That's what I want to hear the most, actually, the criticism. So
I think Raimundo,
no,
momento. Raimundo Panikar's answer would be, do not dilute. Do not dilute, because I read Japanese as a native, no? And I also reading is interpretation correct. So your interpretation will come in always. It is impossible not to interpret what you read, correct? So, but we acknowledge, okay, there is interpretation, there is a room for each person to understand it differently. But to put another category of Japanese or American or Spanish or Brazilian, what is that category? I don't understand. I don't understand that category.
So, sorry. So not as a Brazilian or a Latin American or something like that, but to read it as yourself with your own.
No, I am asking you the question because when you read it as a Japanese, when you read it as someone who is trained in Japan, when you read it as someone who is trained in Brazil, do you read the passage differently?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah.
It's the topos of
me.
Yes.
Me, but specifically myself. I think nowadays I can only read as myself, as a Brazilian who has lived in Japan for 14 years now. And I think all these backgrounds come together whenever I read.
In other words, my point is, I mean, in the interest of time, I try to be brief. I think the question was a misguided question. I mean, the one that whoever gave you the advice. It feels to me there's a category of Japaneseness, there's a category of Westernness, there is a category of Easternness. But my point was that logos, rationality, is transcultural. In other words, you can translate without distorting to a certain point. That is my point.
Mhm.
Okay, interesting. Thank
That
you.
is my certain point. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think that is what I want to say.
Mhm,
Many
thank you.
people say you cannot translate one language to another.
Mhm,
True in poetry,
mhm,
but it's not true in philosophy.
mhm. Yeah.
You can translate what you are thinking, not translate, but you can explain what you are thinking in another language.
Mhm. It's almost like interpreting the thing, right?
No, you can
More
explain.
Yeah.
You can explain, because I can explain Tokoro. This
Course.
one is a noun. This is more of a adverbial
Mhm,
mode.
mhm,
One is a place, one is a mode. If I translate it like that, explain it like that, Western people understand it right away.
mhm.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in other words, I think it's a matter of explanation.
Mhm,
And I think we are in this field of philosophy, not to mystify,
mhm,
but to clarify.
mhm.
That is my conviction.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yes, of course.
Agree.
if you doubt, if you doubt,
No, I do agree.
no, I'm just joking.
No, no, I'm joking as well. We can discuss more next week. Don't worry, 先生。ね、また来週ね、お話ししましょう。すいません。
Michiko Sensei, we have still some questions. Is this on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, now we still have some question. I think because of the time, would you like them to ask all the questions and you answer them all at once?
No, give me one or two, select one or two important
Okay.
questions.
I will ask a question from the YouTube channel. Mike Moreira, he asked about concrete thinking from Nishida. He asks if Nishida's thinking have political implications. An example I imagine is if this concrete thinking can lead to taking part in politics.
What is the Nishida's thinking? What is the adjective you used?
He said concrete thinking.
A concrete thinking. Yes, of course you do. We live in this concrete time, no?
Yes.
So, I mean, we are look at the United States right now. We just had this Democratic National Convention, before then the Republican National Convention. I don't know how closely you're watching these things, but it's embroiling the whole country, no? So it seems to me to philosophize without recourse to what is happening, not influenced, but be informed, I think makes your philosophy much more relevant in a way. I mean, if I say, okay, that, that's America, American politics, and when I do is Nishida, and I have nothing to say, then I don't need to exist. But the fact that I cast my vote, I must have my own opinion, no? And then where does it go back? I think it goes back to something very profound, humanity. What is humanity? What is fairness? What is justice? All these questions, no? And I think that Nishida's, not only Nishida's philosophy, every philosophy has, by definition, a kind of a political aspect. So long as we live in, like Plato's idea of republic, the place of women, we may not be happy with what he said, but it reflects the time. And it is a kind of a political issue in a way, right? And it seems to me you cannot say this is politics and this is philosophy. No, in that sense. So long as we are breathing and we are, because even to eat something, the products produced by working people. A lot of them are Mexican migrant workers, you know, in this country. And for us to discriminate those people, you know what I mean? There are some people who consider those people not really, you know, I mean, I think it is wrong. I think the fact that we are being sustained by what we eat and all these things, I think, has a very concrete implication, it seems to me. And I think the more we are interested in, say, environment, global warming, all these things, the more appropriate whatever we bring to the table, I think, as a philosopher. Otherwise, we might be in the paradise, not to worry about anything else.
Mhm.
But also, I think we need to be very clear. I haven't done any work on this, but it's a very difficult question. How to draw a line between ideas and ideologies?
Mhm.
Because we often don't see the difference. And I think that's where maybe philosophy can contribute a little more. And I think that's what Nishida and some of the Kyoto School people were trying to do by addressing the issues that were consuming the Japanese people then, but not as an ideological statement, but as a philosophical statement. There is a difference. And I think that's something we need to really clarify. I don't have the time to go into it. You know, I mean, my life is limited. Somebody else, someone young, trained in political philosophy, could maybe write something very important. Not too many people have addressed that particular issue. And I think it's essential.
Thank you, Sensei. I have sensed this connection between Nishitani's philosophy and the political implications of interpretation concept, for example. And I have some comments to make for your presentation because I published an article on methodology of intercultural philosophy in English, actually. And I agree with many points that you made, but I will give my question to someone else and we can talk in another moment. Lucas, no? Okay. Lucas have a question.
Hi, Michiko. I'll be very brief. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. As always, it's great to listen to you. Regarding your two questions, first of all, I would say that definitely I think bilingual translations are helpful and important. I actually have translated a lot of books from this Korean philosopher, Byung-Chul Han, you know, from the Burnout Society. He writes in German, and I translated it into Portuguese. And sometimes I like to keep the original word in brackets, you know, next to the translation. Mostly because I want to have a dialogue with whoever is reading. So I think the bilingual translations are interesting, not in the sense of you wanting to necessarily be completely faithful to the original or whatever, but rather it enables this dialogue with whoever is reading. So he can understand your choices. He can try to see where you're coming from. And at the same time, he can consider other possibilities. I think it's a path to dialogue that is very important in a way.
Would you be able to spell this Korean philosopher's name?
I can write it. I think
I cannot.
I can write it here in the chat later because I'm pretty sure I don't know how to pronounce the name correctly. But you know, like Byung.
You can send me a chat.
I'll send it in the chat. But yeah, because he's a South Korean philosopher who writes in German because he lives in Germany. So
is he the phenomenologist?
I don't think so. No, he wrote books like Burnout Society. He has a book on philosophy of Zen Buddhism actually, but I can show you.
Okay,
I
fine.
can send that to you in the chat later on. But the very short question I wanted to make to you really, no, it's not like that. I can show you.
I know.
Amanda is actually getting the name right now. But the question I wanted to ask you is that I thought it was very fascinating what Pennycart told you, that be careful because what you study is what you become. I think that this could be regarded kind of as a methodological principle in itself, that you should attempt to become what you study in order to really know it. But then this raises a question, because on the other hand, you used as a principle this idea of know where you stand, right? And at the same time that we want to know where we stand, we also want to go beyond it when we study something else. We want to move past the place we are. We want to go different places, right? So I wonder if you think we could put this together in the sense, the more you know where you are, the more capable you're actually of leaping to some other place. It's like, kneeling so you can jump higher, taking a firmer step on the ground so you can take a leap to somewhere else. Do you think this could be a way of thinking this intercultural study, that in order to learn something new, to become something new, you also have to be more aware of where you stand right now?
It's interesting as an idea.
Yeah.
Lucas,
Yeah.
it's interesting as an idea, but in actuality, I think it's a theoretical question. Because when you jump and when you come back down, where do you come back down?
Well, it depends on how you jump, really.
No, you come back down on your feet.
Right.
You land on your feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so. I think whether the ground is the same or different, who knows?
Yeah. It's true.
So I find it interesting as a metaphor, but I think in reality it doesn't change.
Yeah,
It
but
doesn't change the point.
yeah, but I
Of
mean,
course.
yeah, just very quickly. No, but my actual question, in a sense, even if we don't use the metaphor, is how do we reconcile those two principles, that you want to know where you stand, but at the same time you don't want to be limited to just be what you already are. You
Okay,
want to
that is
become
your
something else.
presupposition, sweetheart.
Yeah.
That is your presupposition. You feel that you are limited by where you stand. But
Yeah.
imagine you stand nowhere.
Mhm.
Are you free?
No, but that's
Yes.
yeah.
No, I think this is an important point, because I think where you stand is that we are physical.
Yeah,
We are
yeah.
life.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
when you jump and you don't come back,
Yeah. No, maybe we can talk more about that once we have another Congress, because it's already really late, but thank you so much.
no, I understand what you are trying to say. And, Nishida talks about pure experience developing, unfolding. And I think that's what you want to say. But it can unfold, but still your feet are touching the ground. You don't need to leave the ground to unfold.
Yeah, maybe a better metaphor was walking, but never mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. No, I understand. Thank you. I understand that.
I think because we would love to keep this conversation going, but because of the time that you already gave us, I think we can keep thinking about it and talk more later. So, Michiko Sensei, thank you very much for your presence here and the enlightenment of your presentation. And I hope we see each other very soon in a different context, not online
Yes.
anymore.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
this opportunity.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed seeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to say to everyone again that the link of the translation, and I'm going to talk a little bit in Portuguese so people can understand. O link da tradução do texto da professora Michiko Yusa está na nossa live no YouTube e no nosso site, alafi.wix. .wix.com/alafi, eu acho. Pronto. E a gente continua amanhã, às 9 da manhã, com as mesas de trabalho, as mesas redondas. E no nosso site a gente tem também o link para inscrição na especialização de Filosofia Intercultural, primeira especialização de Filosofia Intercultural do Brasil. Então, a gente vai abrir matrículas novamente e ela se dá na Universidade de Passo Fundo. So, thank you again, Professor Michiko Yusa. And we end our conference here today.
Goodbye.
Tchau, tchau. Thank you, Michiko. Tchau, tchau. Matarai.
Ciao.